welcome to the Art of Decluttering podcast. I'm Amy Revell, following on from the singing from last week.
And I'm Kirsty Ferrugia. I was like, what's the opposite of singing?
Yeah, could you sing it in a baritone voice?
And I'm Kirsty Ferrugia.
So if you are already regretting hitting play on today's episode, we understand. We promise it can only get better from here. We're talking, ironically, about balance, which is not the reason that I did high and Kirsty did low.
No.
But we are talking about balance today and what balance is, how it relates to decluttering and organising, how it can be a tool for helping you achieve an intentional life and intentional living that you may be aiming for. Kirst, tell me, do you like the word balance, or does it kind of give you the heebie-jeebies?
It gives me the heebie-jeebies, probably because, like, I just think of that childhood, what is it? Seesaw?
Oh, yeah, those horrible.
Yeah, and I always
of torture.
Yeah, I always like standing in the middle and trying to get the balance. Like, you know.
Oh,
like,
yeah, no, that's for all like the girls who were gymnasticy could always do that. Us girls that were more like basketball and shot put and like 100-meter sprinters could never do that.
Okay.
We would fall off. So tell us about what that is.
Oh, no, just like trying to get the seesaw to balance in the middle. And it was hard. And I think that the word balance is hard because you're always having to reposition yourself. You're always trying to find where that equilibrium is. And it's just that it's constant.
Yeah.
It's
balance is really the annoying thing. I hate balance. I think it's stupid, just putting it out there at the start. But the thing, like, I just think about when you're trying to balance in any other situation. So if you were trying to balance on one leg, if you were trying to balance a seesaw, if you're trying to do any of that, you have to make 100 different micro adjustments in order to maintain balance. And if you're spending all your energy and time in making micro adjustments, and I'm not just talking about standing on one leg, but when you're trying to get that balance in family life, in work, in fitness, in health, in mindset, in spirituality, in love, in all of the things, if you're trying to find balance, you're constantly having to assess and make tiny little changes, whereas I feel like that's a bit of a waste of time. Or it's a big use of energy, maybe.
Yeah, because I feel like then your energy is actually going into focusing on being balanced.
Yes.
And not the living.
Yeah, like not even doing the things.
Yeah, even if you're thinking about like standing on one leg, like what is the purpose of standing on one leg? Like, you know, and there might be some really good reasons. You might be having a medical exam where they have to see if you can stand on one leg. Like there is a time and a purpose and a season. But for the majority of, like, that's not what you should be focusing on. And I feel like that word balance makes you focus on the balance.
Yeah, on the wrong thing. Yeah, not the actual things that you're... So I think, and I think if we go to the heart behind balance, it's about how do you engage and enjoy multiple things that are of importance to you? Like, that's what we're talking about, isn't it? Is that the crux of it?
Well, and that's what, like, you opened with, what intentional living, like how, and so, and this is what the concept isn't a bad concept about figuring out how you do the things that you love doing, or the people that you love, or what you want to be putting your hand to. Like, there's nothing. Yeah, that's not the issue. It's the focusing on how do you do that.
Yeah. And trying to get it right all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's so much expectation in this word balance that it's achievable, or that it's even a thing. Like, why? At some point did somebody say we have to find balance?
Well, I know why, because people, and we see this all the time, that people tilt into too much of one thing. So, if you're not eating a balanced diet, you might be binging on Ferrero Rochers like I just did.
I did wonder what you were eating because I could hear the packet before.
Ferrero
I have not
Rochers,
had a
3 of them.
Ferrero Rocher in years.
Which surprises me because you do like Nutella.
I know, right?
Anyway, but let's take it, or people are workaholics and they're tipping too much into work and not into family responsibilities. So I can absolutely see why we've come to this need for having balance, quotation marks. But I think that I've just read the definition of balance that Belinda has put in our notes for us. Thank you again, Ben. An even distribution of weight, enabling someone or something to remain upright and steady. Now, this is what I want to question. Why do we put so much priority and emphasis on remaining upright and steady in life? Because that means if you're not, then is
there something intrinsically
wrong with you? That just stood out to me in that, to remain upright and steady. And yet what happens when you have a mental health crisis? What happens if
you fall and break your arm? You have or you're like the Revels at the moment and we have a Houdini mouse in our house. That has thrown us into imbalance because we're obsessed with catching Houdini. Imbalance.
Yeah. And so I feel this tension today between calling out the BS on why is society telling us that we need to remain upright and steady, and also how do we combat our tendencies to fall out of balance, to tilt into something that isn't sustaining for too long.
Yeah, and I would question when you talk about it being upright and steady, I want to be when you talk about it in terms of character, I want to be someone of character who is upright and steady. But that's not what balance is. When it's talking about balance, it's talking about the functionality of upright as in vertical and steady as in not wavering, but not a character flaw. Not a character, I can't think of the word, but it's not about defining a character when we're talking about balance with uprightness and steadiness, because that is something that you can aim to achieve and aim to want to have without feeling like you then have the balance of all of the factors in your life. I have balance between and balance. So I have so many thoughts that my mouth is not catching up.
I know, because I'm even questioning, yes, you can desire to have a character that's upright and steady, but do you, what happens when you make a mistake? Where is the grace and the mercy for not being upright and steady in a moment?
Yeah.
Do you know, are we looking at the big picture of somebody's character? I was in this beautiful conversation this morning about, when you're in the supermarket, and this is, so shout out to my friend Summer who made this point. When you walk in the supermarket and you see a mum who's lost their cool with their kids.
Yeah.
And, some of us go to judgment, some of us go to compassion. Her point was that we're only seeing a micro portion of her day.
Yeah.
And so we don't know what's gone on before. We don't know how many times she's asked the kid not to climb out of the shopping trolley before that moment, or, whatever the situation may be.
Yeah.
And so I also want to challenge that upright and steady. What if we're only catching a glimpse of somebody not being upright and steady?
Oh, and I'm using it as a self-reflection tool rather than a tool in which to view others through.
No, and I'm meaning it in the same way. How do you have grace for yourself when you're not upright and steady in a moment? I think it's that, you definitely have the characteristics and the character of being upright and steady, Amy. And how do you have grace for yourself
Yeah,
when you
when
don't.
you're not perfect.
And the
And
same with all of balance. Like if we're
Yeah.
talking about character, if we're talking about like anything that we could apply balance to.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a seesaw for a minute, because one of the things I'm thinking is, why do we talk about a seesaw being an instrument of balance? Because actually it's an instrument of imbalance. Because a seesaw is so very rarely, if only for a microsecond on its way from imbalance to imbalance, actually balanced. And it's the same really when you're standing on one foot, is you're constantly adjusting. And so the micro moments of actually being balanced is very minimal. And so maybe it's actually to have balance, what you need to identify are what are the big things that are going to be contributing. So for us, Kirsten, it might be business, family, and health. Or for someone, it might be sport and their work and their men's poker night. Like, what are the big things that you actually want to keep in balance? Or maybe it is like the work-life balance. It's like, I understand that work is a really big part of my life and my family's a really big part of my life. And so what does it mean for that seesaw to be in motion? That it's not about it actually being in balance. It's about it going, sometimes family requires more, sometimes work requires more. And so the idea of balance is more about the items that you're trying to balance than achieving equilibrium.
Yeah. And because when we're talking about a seesaw, when you're just speaking about a seesaw, I actually had that image of the scales of justice. So
Yes. Yeah.
like
yeah.
that, in that case, we do want it to be even. Or, you know, depending on but so if we're weighing money or weighing something, you know, like in the olden days where they had weights or, you know, even if you're going, I'm just thinking about a scale,
Yeah.
a two-sided scale. Sometimes you do want things to be in balance.
Yeah, but that's less, I feel like that's more about, fairness than about the balance that we're talking about. Like, I think when you're talking about the scale side of balance, you're talking about accuracy and fairness and equability. I can't say the word. What's the word?
Yeah. I
That
won't
one.
be able to say it either.
To make it equitable. But what we're talking about is very different to that. What we're talking about is, as Brooke McCallery would call it, is the tilt. So what are the contributing factors that you would like to try and focus on and tilt between, or to lean into? What are the things that you're going to lean into and what are the things that you're not going to lean into? Because I actually think that in order to have somewhat of a balance, you need to decide what you're not going to lean into. For example, I would say that the two main things that I try and balance is family and work. And when I'm with family, like when we're sitting and having dinner or we're talking to Cal, I don't have my work email open on my phone or anything like that. Like, because I'm in with the family. I'm in doing that. When I'm at basketball with the kids, I'm at basketball with the kids. I'm not answering the work phone. I'm not doing any of that. And then when I'm at work, you're leaning into work. And so what are the 2 things or 3 things or 10 things for you that are part of what you want to achieve balance in? What are those big important factors? And what are they for you, Kirst? And do you agree?
I think a big theme of mine this week in particular has been community and figuring out things in community. And so I think, this is me verbally processing, that sometimes you need to do things, you need to find tilting or tipping into or leaning into needs to be done in community.
Can you explain?
So, yeah. So for me, I need to be aware and acknowledge how my family are feeling about how much I'm working.
Gotcha. So your balance can't be achieved necessarily as a island.
Yes.
Okay. I like this.
And so the same with health. Like, and we all know people who have gone, like, and let's just put it out there that we shouldn't be judging other people, even our family members and people that we live with and stuff. But it's hard. And it's hard when their choices impact on us. And
yeah.
So how do we, because, you know, my kid said to me this morning, I hate it when you go to the gym in the morning because I don't see you in the morning. And I'm all like, I hear you. I appreciate that. However, work commitments mean that I can't go to the gym during the day. And actually, my gym's not open during the day.
I was going to say, and funnily enough, the reason I go during the day is because the other option is I go at night and I want to be around for the kids.
Yes, no, exactly. And so for me, my choice is early in the morning or in the evening.
Yeah,
and so they miss out. The impact's on them no matter what.
Yeah.
However, if I was going in the morning and at night and during the day, like if I was spending 7 hours at the gym every day, who is that serving? Is that tilting and leaning into that, serving my family and helping me to be the best mum that I can be? And, you know, for some people the answer will be yes.
Yeah.
For me, the answer's no. And
that's right. And if you think about fly in, fly out workers, Kirst, that is a really great example of the full tilt. I'm at work for 7 days and then I fly back and I'm at home for 7 days. Or we've got friends that are police officers and it's like work 10 days straight, eating, sleeping, working. And then, hey, who wants to go camping? And I've got time to take you bowling and let's have a milkshake after school.
Yeah. And so everybody's unique and different. And my point was that it has to be, it doesn't have to, nothing has to, there's no has to. I think a healthy model is doing it in community with those that are affected by your choices. So, Amy, I am affected by how much you work. So that I could have a place to speak into that in your life. I am affected by your health as well, but I'm not as affected by how you spend your time with your family. Do you know, unless it affects your ability to work in certain circumstances.
Exactly. But also there's so much, like, I agree with you on everything you've said. And I also think there is, like, particularly in, like, let's put, like, the business partner relationship aside and let's talk about family for a minute, is we're also individuals.
100%.
And how do you, it's a really fine balance in you, it's a really fine balance, no pun intended, in how other people's priorities impact on you. Yes. I've got a lady I know whose husband got really into, so was not an exerciser, but then decided to start doing like Ironman marathons around the country and would spend all weekend riding and running and swimming, all weekend, and lent so heavily into it that the impact on the family was significant because they had young kids.
Yes.
And then I've seen it happen where actually leaning into something is for the betterment of family.
Yes.
So someone might be leaning into self-development or leaning into learning how to cook and cook well or leaning into decluttering. And even though the time spent leaning in may be difficult, the reward impact, like, it's not just about the time spent leaning in. And I know, Kirst, you guys had this when your kids were younger, and I had the same, where we were both predominantly stay-at-home mums when the kids were little, and our husbands worked. And I think Simon probably worked longer hours than Cal, but Cal travelled a bit for work. And there was, in our marriage, an overall balance rather than just in Cal's time. So Cal was leaning really heavily into work and I was leaning really heavily into family. And our balance worked because it was about more than just one person's balance.
Community.
Yes. So, and then, but there's, oh my gosh,
I know,
so much.
I 100% agree. I absolutely agree that there is, like, we have autonomy. Like,
Yeah.
I have autonomy
Yeah.
to go, you know what? I am going to go to the gym for 7 hours every day, you know.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, family, but oh, yeah.
Yes, and that's where I think that community can be really helpful as long as it's in the healthy aspect of community rather than the controlling aspect that community can be.
And being okay that your partner or your teenager or your whatever may not want to have any bar of what you have to say about their balance.
100%. Yes.
And I think that balance looks really different whether you have neurodiversities or disabilities as well. Like some of the clients that we work with lean really heavily into a hobby or a special interest. And there is no balance. It is all in on that thing, but that it can still be healthy even though it's imbalanced because there are other things that are still important, even though that takes the predominant part in their thinking or activity or hobby or time or conversation. Like
Yes, and that's why I feel like it's in community but also zoomed out so that you can be like, okay, I'm leaning into this for a season.
Yeah.
And I may not know when that season's going to be up. You know, like Simon used to be well into cycling and would spend at least half the day on Saturday out riding. And this is when we had really young kids. And he would then tilt into family in the afternoon. But in my mind, that didn't make up for the challenging morning I had with the kids in the morning. But now he doesn't ride hardly at all. And he could not have told me at the beginning, oh, this will be over in 10 years. Sometimes we don't know what that season, how long that season can be for. Mm-hmm. But it's also like, so my point was that some things can be made in community and you can also take the big picture, the zoom out picture of like, okay, I'm tipping into my health for this season because I want to live a long life and look after you children and be with my husband for a very long time. So actually this might turn into a lifestyle rather than just a season.
Just a tilt, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that I'm really... Like, how do we navigate, and this may not be a discussion for right now, but like, let's turn it into decluttering. Like, let's turn our eyes to decluttering. And if somebody is tilting into decluttering and their partner's going, oh my gosh, are you ever going to finish this? Like, how can you be so obsessed with this decluttering? And I think that in some ways, at least with decluttering, there's an end point because you can get your house to a stage where you're happy.
There's not always though.
I've
got a couple of clients with OCD who have identified to us that they actually don't know when to stop. Like there are some things in, our neurodiversities that mean that knowing when enough is enough is really hard. And so, and that can manifest as hoarding. It can manifest as minimalism. It can manifest as an eating disorder. It can manifest as obesity. It can manifest as isolation. It can manifest as like being broke or squandering money. Like, keep going. I'm just adding my many thoughts as we go.
No, and that's where I'm all like, well, how do you... I think that this is where I keep coming back to like, okay, how do you hold in tension your desire to continue decluttering when you've got your partner going, oh my gosh, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Like, or you're too far gone into this. Like, can you tilt back into family, or can you tilt into not yelling at the kids every time they don't do something? Like, don't put something away because now you're so focused on the tidying aspect of decluttering. Like, and can you just relax? Can you just chill? Can you just sit on the couch with us? Can you just play a game with us? Can we get out of the house? Can we not get out of, like, can we go home? Can we be in the house? Like, if it's on the other side of the scale where...
Do you think a part of balance is is the intentionality, but you being the decider. Like, I think if you feel I can't tilt the other way, like if I was, if the kids were like, oh, please come and watch my basketball game, and I'm like, I can't, I have to go for a run. And I feel this compulsion that I don't have agency over the balance. I wonder if that is an indicator, like whether when you can choose and you're like, well, I'm choosing to spend a lot of time reading at the moment. And it's not because I'm lazy, it's because I'm choosing to. But when you have this compulsion of like, something's not right and I can't not do this thing, is that an indicator perhaps that the balance is the master rather than you being the master of balance?
Yeah, or lack of balance in that case.
Yeah,
like your lack of choice.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
When you feel like, I think that's a really good thought to ponder on, and maybe people can do that, like, and figure out if that is their truth. Does that make sense? Like, because
Yeah.
I think it's a really good question. Like, what is driving a tilt?
Yeah. Yes.
Because
obligation, intention.
Yeah.
Guilt.
Fear.
Yeah.
Like, why do people tip into work? You know, and there's many reasons for that.
Yeah.
It could be because they need the money, or they fear not getting the money. It could be that they're identity. It could be that they're trying to avoid obligations. Like, my mate came to the gym the other day, and he's just got a newborn, and I made some comment to him in jest, like going, "Oh, you're just avoiding being at home with your newborn at this time of the morning," and like, and we had a joke about it, but like, that can be the reason that we tilt into things, is actually avoiding our obligations
or avoiding relationship. Like sometimes, you know, you might stay at work a little bit longer or go out for drinks after work because your relationship at home is really tricky and it's just too hard. And so you do go to the gym on the way home, and you do, you know, you might, or you declutter because you're busy at home because you're actually really anxious about going to a social engagement. So you say no to the social engagements because you've got anxiety or you've got fear or you've got whatever. Yeah, like I think we're providing lots of questions and not many answers today, which is totally fine.
We're not the experts on mindset and balance and what that means.
Human psychology.
Yeah, but I think, like, I think it's good to be a questioner. I know I say this nearly every episode, but to be a questioner of your own values and your own motivations and your own thinking around this stuff, because and I think that, like, it does tie really well into what does balance look like in decluttering and organize. Like, do you do it because you love it, or do you do it under duress? Like, is your partner pressuring you, or society pressuring you, or whatever? Is there a certain level of decluttering and organizing, like, that will make you happy? How do you tilt out of it too? Like, you know, how do you then go, okay, where's that line in the sand where enough's enough and I need to just start keeping on top of a tidy home?
Yeah, and I just need to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's an offset for everything. Like, when we talk about balance, is when you balance to one side, you know, what's the cost and what's the benefit? And I think everything that you're doing with balance is that cost benefit analysis. Like, if I'm leaning into cooking, then, you know, I might be getting enjoyment. I might find it relaxing. I might save money. But also it takes away from
these examples that you've given us today.
I know.
You
Running,
cooking, you running.
Yeah, I'm doing like all the things. And reading.
This is aspirational.
The reading one.
Amy.
I don't think I've said any that, so you're leaning into cooking. So there's like all of these, you know, whether that's, you consider those things positive, but the offset is that you don't have time to keep on top of the washing, or you had to say no to catching up with a friend, or you couldn't take your sister to her dental appointment. I don't know. Like, there's always the things that the cost benefit analysis is really important. and that all comes back to your why. So you can decide, is it worth it?
Yeah, and acknowledging that there's different seasons and that we can tilt into different, you know, if you chose to breastfeed your children, it's, you know, that it's only for a season. You're not going to be breastfeeding an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
So like acknowledging the seasons that you're in and that some things you can put a finite boundary on it.
That's really true, actually.
What about not feeding your 18-year-old?
Yeah. They'll find a way to feed themselves. I found that, and I know this is, you know, us reflecting a lot on our own, but I have always really loved work. But we made the decision when our kids were little that so I'd been a full-time worker from leaving school through till when I had kids. Cal had studied for years, so I was the sole income earner. And I really enjoyed it. I didn't, you know how a lot of people were like, yes, maternity leave. Like there's an excuse for me not to work. Not that the baby's an excuse, but like society says, oh, you should work. And sometimes there's a lot of people like, I'm really looking forward to, with no pressures so that I have to go back to work. I wasn't that person. I didn't look forward to it, but we chose to. And I tilted in. Like I was the craft mum. Like, you know how all of the mums are like, craft is for kinder. No, craft was for 3:30 at Amy's house every single day of the week. And I really tilted into it intentionally, even though I would have loved to have worked. That was the choice we made and I loved it. But that season doesn't last forever. Like, Kirst, our kids are not at home anymore. Like they're at school for 7 hours a day and then they're at basketball or dancing or taekwondo and swimming and then they're in bed. Like the seasons change with the balance. They really, really do.
Yeah. And so that's where it just comes back to being intentional about, you know, how especially when you're questioning other people's choices, like your loved ones' choices, because, you know, let's not question randos' choices. But if we're, you know, okay, babe, like, yes, I really want to support you in working really hard on this project at work. When is the deadline? So I can, like, just having that communication around setting up some expectations and then like being able to reassess and go, oh, actually that project didn't finish and it was stretched on. So just keep me up to date so I know that, you know, so I don't get missed expectations, because that's what hurts the most. Like that's what's the most frustrating, is that we thought it was, you know, let's talk about a weight loss journey, or like, you know, I thought you were just going to be spending your money on light and easy until you hit this this weight, but no, now we're continuing to spend it. So just acknowledging other people's feelings about their perception of your imbalance or your tilt or your lean into something is, I think, just healthy to have discussions and to be open to people questioning you. But anyway.
Awesome. I'm just going to jump straight to in fact, before we jump to a review that's been left, we want to thank Coco, Danielle and Karen Van Meter for becoming Patreon supporters recently for us. Patreon is a way that you can jump on and be part of supporting the podcast. Belinda is out and Jared both work on our podcast for us every week. And so we thank you for supporting us and supporting them. Kirst, do you want me to read this review?
No, I will.
Great. Go.
It's from Joe Hillsley on Facebook, it looks like.
It is a Facebook review.
Yeah. So she says, I began listening to the podcast in September 2020 and have been working my way through the episode. I am up to the episodes recorded at the start of 2021, and between the call out for people living in New South Wales and people who like green, I finally made the time to write a review.
Go, Joe!
I have also literally just an hour ago joined the Head, Heart and Home course. Whoop,
Whoop, whoop.
Thanks, Joe. I listen to the podcast in the car, and there's so many messages that resonate with me that I often find myself sitting in the car after I've arrived at my destination just to finish off an episode. I also find myself repeating the messages to myself throughout the day. Don't put it down, put it away is on loop in my brain. As someone who has often felt overwhelmed with clutter, despite good organisational skills, I just wanted to say thank you to Amy and Kirsty for your podcast. I love, love, love it. And we love getting reviews from people like you, Joe, and people who support our business in this way. So thank you.
This week, we want you to leave a review if you have play equipment in your backyard. There may not be a seesaw, but if you have any kids' play equipment in the backyard, whether you've got kids or not, we'd love you to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or on Facebook like Joe. And we will see you next week.
Yay. Good luck with the balance.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining us.
If you've learnt something awesome today, we'd love you to leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook so others can find our podcast too.
Don't forget you can see the show notes in your podcast app or over at our website artofdecluttering.com.au. So if there's anything you want more info on, check it out there.
If you'd like to join our supporter community, you can do so over at patreon.com/theartofdecluttering.
We hope you have a great rest of your day
and enjoy the freedom. We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture.
We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging.